Does he really need to be here? Dex asked, glaring at Keith. Keith smirked. I was just thinking the same thing about you. Sophie rubbed her temples. She had bigger problems than two stubborn boys. One big, gray, muscly one in particular. We can handle this, Sandor, she told him for the 10th time. You're trying to break into a place your parents have not only forbidden you to go, but have built a special locked gate specifically to keep you away from. Be glad I haven't barricaded you in your room. Whoa, Gigantor's hardcore. And why are Grady and Edeline so... Keith's voice trailed off and his smile faded. This is where it happened, isn't it? Where you guys were... Sophie cleared her throat. Yeah. The cliffside gate was in plain sight of the clue that Black Swan had planted, and they'd hidden it inside a lock. That had to mean they wanted her to pick the lock on the gate and go back to the one place she'd vowed never to go again, the cave where it all went wrong. Face your fears. Is that why you needed Dex here? Keith asked quietly. Actually, having Dex there made it worse. He was just as terrified as she was, and she hated putting him through it again. He's the only one who can open the lock. She glanced at Dex. Dex sighed. Might as well tell him. He seems to know everything else. Oh, more secrets? I love secrets, Keith added. Dex is a technopath. Dex cringed at the word, but Keith's eyes widened. Seriously? That is awesome. Why is that a secret? Dex stared at the lock, a small silver orb that dangled from a chain between the two gates. As he shrugged, his cheeks tinged with pink. So you can just, make a gadget do whatever you want? Sorta. Dex traced his finger over the metal, making it flash with the rush of runes. It's more like I understand them. I ask them how to do what I want, and they tell me. That is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And, dude, we need to team up. Think of all the chaos we could cause. Dex's face was tomato red by that point, but he was also grinning from ear to ear. It made Sophie want to hug them both, but then the silver locked flashed green in Dex's hands and clicked open, letting the chain slip free. Step aside, Sandor ordered, pushing past them as he drew his curved black sword. Everyone, stay behind me. He threw open the gate and started down the narrow, zigzagging stairway that cut a path down the steep cliff to the sandy cove below. It was a path Sophie had walked dozens and dozens of times, but her legs still didn't want to cooperate. Dex's didn't seem to be working either. Come on, guys, Keith said, nudging his way between them and hooking his arms through theirs. Gigantor's got us covered. Sophie tried to believe him as they made the long, slow descent, but her insides had still tangled into knots on top of knots, and by the time they reached the white sandy beach, she was pretty sure she was going to throw up, especially when she turned to face the largest cave. The wide gap in the weathered rocks held good memories and bad memories, and the worst memory of them all, the moment where everything got flipped inside out and upside down and ripped apart, when three dark cloaked figures jumped out of the shadows and took her and Dex away. Sandor thoroughly inspected each of the caves before giving them the all clear. So, we going in? Keith asked when everyone hesitated. Dex dropped Keith's arm and backed up. I'm sorry, I can't, Hey, Sophie said, waiting for him to look at her. It's okay, you don't have to. Just wait here. She knew exactly how he felt, but she had to face her fears. This is for Alden, she whispered as she took a step forward, then another. Sandor and Keith started to follow, but she held out her arms. I'd rather do this one alone if that's okay. I'll call if I need you. She didn't know what was waiting for her in there, but she wanted to face it on her own. She was tired of being afraid. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the roar of the oceans, as she took the last few steps and entered the dimly lit cave. Shadows danced along the walls and across the packed sand floor, and her eyes were drawn to the spot where she'd collapsed to cry. Right before the arms had reached out she counted her breaths and forced the memory out of her mind. She had one job to do, and she wasn't going to let anything get in her way. A tiny pile on the floor in the back of the cave caught her attention, and as she made her way over, her breath caught in her throat. Freshly churned sand. She spun around, checking for any sign that she wasn't alone, but whoever had stirred up the ground was gone. They'd left something, though. A small clump of twigs and branches on a nook in the rocks. A nest. Tucked in the center was a small mirrored trinket box with a familiar black curve worked into the latch. She closed her eyes and made a silent wish that this would be the answer she needed, then plucked the tiny cube from the twigs. Inside, she found another scrap of paper and a tiny black swan. Not a pin this time, a charm. Carved much more crudely with jagged cuts and very little detail, which seemed strange, but she was sure there was a reason. She hoped the clue would make it clearer. There were 2 lines of text on the note when she unfolded it, but her eyes only saw the first. A small sob slipped through her lips as she read the 4 words that changed everything. We can fix you. Chapter 54. You okay in there? Keith called, startling Sophie so much she almost dropped the note. Yeah, I'm fine. I'll be out in a second. She sank to the nearest rock, taking deep breaths to stop shaking. They could fix her. They didn't say how. This was the Black Swan, after all. But she was willing to forgive them for the lies and the secrets and the ways they'd messed with her life. Even if they were the bad guys, she would trust them if it could make her right again. All she needed was to figure out the clue. The note had another sentence, one that was just as vague and unhelpful as the other time she'd heard it. Follow the pretty bird across the sky. She studied the crude black swan charm again. It hardly qualified as a pretty bird, although she glanced back at the nest where the sand was freshly dredged. There were no other footprints, almost like someone had plopped out of the ground and then tunneled back in. Dwarves. Maybe that's how the Black Swan were keeping tabs on her. And if they had dwarves on their side, maybe... One more minute or I'm coming in there, Sandor called. I'll be right out. Sophie tucked in the charm back in its pouch along with the note and shoved both in her shoe. Yes, she'd promised Keith and Sandor she'd keep them in the loop, but this was about her. She hadn't even told Keith she needed to be fixed, and she intended to keep it that way. But they'd never believe she didn't find anything, so she grabbed some of the twigs from the nest and snapped off the ends until they fit inside the box. She checked her pockets, wishing she were more like Dex, always carrying interesting things. Then she remembered the trackers. She felt along the edge of her cape, relieved when her fingers touched the outline of a penny-sized disc near the front corner. She didn't have scissors or time, so she tore the fabric with her teeth, grabbed the copper circle and slipping it in the box just as 2 silhouetted figures appeared in the cave's entrance. I said I'd be right out, she yelled as she ran to meet them, tripping a few times on the rocks. Keith smirked. Don't ever try to pretend you didn't find anything. I wasn't going to. She handed him the mirrored box, and he dumped the contents into his palm. Twigs and a piece of scrap metal? Can't they just say, go here, do this, and have a nice life? Seems like it would have saved a lot more time. It's not scrap metal, Sandor corrected. It's a tracker. He glanced at Sophie, and she looked away. A tracker? Like to lead us to them? Keith asked. I think it would only tell them where we are, Sophie mumbled, heading out of the cave. Keith caught up with her. So what's the plan then? And don't lie to me, Foster. I can feel you hiding something. It's just a theory right now. I need to think it through. You mean we, Keith said, hooking his arm through hers. We need to think it through. Team Foster, Keith. Now it's Team Foster, Dex, and Keith, Dex said, marching over and taking her other arm. Keith shook his head. That doesn't have the same ring, though it could be handy having a technopath around. Look, guys, I really appreciate the help, but I'm kind of tired and there's a lot of stuff floating around in my brain. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Depends, Keith said, narrowing his eyes. Are you trying to get rid of us so you can go on a secret adventure by yourself? Sophie willed herself to feel calm as she said, I just want some time to think. Fine. You can have the night to think, but we will be revisiting this tomorrow. Come on, Dex, let's go mess with some gadgets before dinner. I know the perfect place. Sophie tuned them out as Keith plotted and schemed the whole way up the stairs. Dex secured the lock on the gate and asked her if she'd really be okay. She promised him she would, and the boys leapt away to cause who knew what kind of trouble. Sandor stayed silent as she greeted Sylvanie, promised her she'd spend time with her later, and made her way inside. But as Sophie closed the door to her bedroom, he held out his hand. I'll need to ask the gnomes to resew that tracker into your cape before you go to school tomorrow. Oh, you caught that, huh? Why did he have to be so obnoxiously good at his job? What was really in the box? She stared at her feet. Another charm and a note. I thought you weren't going to hide things from me. I had to this time. You're not going to let me go, and I have to. They say they can fix me, Sandor, and if anyone can, it's them. I thought you didn't trust them. I don't know what to think about them. I just know I have to try. It might be the only way. His frown sank so deep it looked like his face was cracking. I'm coming with you. You can't. We made a deal. I'm coming with you or I go to your parents. You can't come with me, Sandor, not if I'm right about the clue. She stalked to her desk, digging out the pieces they'd given her. 1 pin, 2 charms, and 2 vague notes. Not a lot to go on, but if she put it all together. See this, she said, holding up the newest note? It says the same thing Prentice told me. Follow the pretty bird across the sky, and I think it means this. She held up the black swan charm. If a dwarf had delivered the charms, then maybe it was made of magician, and maybe the rough, crude cuts affected the pull of the stone, just like the flask that drew water and the pendant that drew light. She held her breath as she picked up the charm bracelet and hooked the tiny swan next to the compass. Then she opened the locket and held the compass flat in her palm, watching the needle spin and come to a stop on somewhere between north and west. I knew it. The Magician is changing where the compass points. So if I follow this direction, it should lead me straight to where the black swan needs me to go. That can't be right. It could be an impossibly long journey. On foot, maybe, but the note says across the sky, and they gave me an alicorn pin. Sandor's eyes widened. Absolutely not. You know that unstable creature won't let me near her, and I cannot allow you to fly off alone, especially without even knowing where you're going. But I have to. If they can fix me, then maybe I can fix Alden, and maybe even Prentice. That's not worth risking your life for. You could be falling into a trap. I'm risking my life anyway. You've seen what the light keeps doing to me. If I don't take this chance, who knows? I can't, Sophie. Maybe if your parents agree, I can't tell them about this. Why not? Grady asked, pushing his way through the door with Edeline right behind him. He glanced at the notes and his face turned so red it looked almost purple. You have a lot of explaining to do, Sophie, starting right now. Sophie had no choice but to come clean about everything. The clues, her plan to fix Alden, her journal, the way the light was affecting her, Wiley's theory, Elwyn not knowing how to help. How could you not tell us about this? Edeline asked as she reread the notes from the Black Swan. I don't know, Sophie mumbled. Grady ran his hands through his hair, making it stick out. Sophie, if your health is in danger, you have to tell us. We can get you help and treatment, and Elwyn already tried everything. If it's really in my genes, and the only ones who can fix me are the ones who'd made me. Edeline sighed. I can't believe you told Elwyn before us. I didn't. I blacked out at school, and Elwyn agreed that we should wait to tell you guys until we knew more. You have enough to worry about already. We do have a lot to worry about, Grady said, gazing out the windows as the sunset streaked the sky with red. But we still always want to know what's going on with you. Honestly, Sophie, I know you've had to keep a lot of secrets in your life, but you have to stop hiding things. We're here to help. I know. Sophie sat on the edge of her bed and twisted the ripped end of her cape. I guess I was just embarrassed. Edeline sat beside her, taking her hand. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. Of course I do. I'm the town freak. Have you noticed how people react when they see me? And how would you feel if you had people tell you that you were malfunctioning, especially if it were true? Grady took the notes from Edeline, squinting at them as he sat on Sophie's other side. Several seconds passed before he asked, So this is why you keep fading? It has to be. How else could I fade with 2 nexuses? She held out both of her wrists, and her heart ached when she realized both were gifts from the backers. Grady squeezed the ruined crest pin on his cape. And you really believe they can fix you? I believe they're my best chance. My only chance. Grady got up to a pace. He'd worn a small rut in the petal-covered carpet before Edeline stood and said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think we should let Sophie go. What? Sophie, Sandor, and Grady asked at the same time. They made her, so if there's something wrong and Elwyn doesn't know what it is, I think we have to let them try to fix it. Otherwise, what do? Let her keep blacking out and fading? How many times can that happen before she doesn't recover? So we send her blindly into a den of murderers, Grady snapped back. We don't know that for sure, Edeline said quietly, but we do know that clearly the Black Swan can get to Sophie anytime they want. She pointed to the notes in Grady's hand. So if they wanted to hurt her, they could have easily done it by now, and they haven't. Maybe Sophie's special because they made her, or maybe it's because we're wrong about them. Either way, I just can't believe that they mean Sophie any harm. And if they can fix her... Grady shook his head. I don't trust them. I know, Edeline whispered, wrapping her arms around him. But I think this time we have to try, for Sophie's sake. This isn't just about me, Sophie reminded them when Grady didn't say anything. If they fix me, I might be able to fix Alden too. Don't you want that? Of course. Grady pulled away from Edeline. I miss my friend terribly. But do you know why I agreed to become an emissary again, Sophie? You said it was because Alden had done so much for you. It was. Grady wiped away a tear. And what I wanted to pay Alden back was for you, bringing you into our lives. Sophie felt her eyes burn. I'm glad he brought me into your lives too. Grady strangled her with a hug. I would give almost anything to have him back, he whispered, but I won't give you up. Give up you. You won't have to, Sophie promised. They want to fix me, Grady. I need to believe that. I don't want to be broken anymore. Grady sighed as he let her go, and he flipped through the Black Swan's notes again as he sat next to her bed. To her on the bed. He stopped on the one that made Sophie the angriest. Patience. Trust. Grady stared at it for so long Sophie started counting the seconds. 81 had passed before he mumbled. Okay. It took a moment for the word to sink in. So, you're going to let me get on Sylvanie and fly wherever the compass leads? Yes. She glanced at Sandor. He was scowling and his hands were clenched into fists, but he didn't argue. You know I'll have to go alone. Sylvanie won't let anyone else come. Actually, that's where you're wrong, Grady said. There's one other person Sylvanie trusts, and even though he's not my first choice as an escort for you, he's better than no one. Sophie couldn't quite hide her groan. You realize you're putting my life in the hands of Keith Sensen, right? So, let me get this straight, Keith said when Sophie was done explaining the new plan. We don't know where we're going, or how long it's going to take us to get there. And we're meeting to fly the Black Swan. We're flying to meet the Black Swan, who may or may not be evil murderers, and this whole thing could be a trap. Pretty much, Sophie agreed, tugging on her heavy velvet cloak. Edeline had insisted she dressed warm, and it looked like Keith had the same idea. He wore a thick gray cloak pinned with the Sensen crest and dark boots and gloves. He almost looked responsible. Awesome. About time this project got a bit more exciting. He glanced at Sandor. Don't worry, Gigantor. I'll keep her safe. Sandor cracked his knuckles. You'd better. It had taken a lot of convincing to make the overprotective goblin remove the trackers from her clothes. Sophie was afraid the Black Swan would be able to tell they were being monitored and would keep themselves hidden. Plus, she'd reminded Sandor that he wouldn't be able to follow her anyway. And your parents didn't have any concerns with you going? Grady asked Keith. You did tell them, right? Of course I told them. Sheesh, you act like I'm some sort of troublemaker. He winked. Seriously, though, they were fine with it. Well, once my dad was done asking me 10,000 questions to make sure I wasn't heading off to recreate the Great Gulan incident or something. Sophie's stomach tightened. You told your dad about... Relax. I only told him that you had to fly with Sylvanie somewhere and your parents didn't want you to go alone. I got your back, Foster. Thank you, she whispered. So, we ready to do this? What do you think, Glitterbutt? He walked over to Sylvanie's enclosure, letting her nuzzle his hands through the bars. You ready for a Foster Keef adventure? Sylvanie snickered. Keef, Keef, Keef. She'd been giddily chanting that since Sophie told her that what was going to happen. Are you sure you shouldn't wait till morning? Grady asked. The last wisps of purple twilight were just fading into the starry night. The sooner we go, the sooner we're back, Sophie reminded him, checking for the 50th time that the charm bracelet was on her wrist with both charms attached. Grady didn't nod, and she could see the doubt blooming in his eyes. This is the only way to make me better, she whispered, and maybe if they do, I can heal Alden and Prentice, and... They're not the ones who matter, Sophie, Grady said, wrapping his arms around her. I'm doing this for you. You have to come back, stronger and healthier than ever. I will, she promised, trying to convince herself as much as him. Don't let them do anything except fix you. And if there's anything strange or scary, make Sylvanie teleport you away if you need to. Just come home safe. If you don't, I'll be home soon. She pulled back to look at him, but he strangled her tighter, whispering, I love you so much, before he finally let her go. I love you too. She almost called him Dad, but it still felt too soon. It was much closer than it had been a few weeks ago, though. Maybe it came down to trust. Grady was giving her a lot of it right now. So was Edeline, as she handed Sophie an overstuffed satchel. Snacks and drinks in case it's a long flight. And you have your imparter? Sophie nodded. You hail us the first second you can. Of course. Edeline's chin quivered as she pulled Sophie in for a hug, kissing her cheek and whispering that she had to be safe. Then she slowly let Sophie go, tucking a strand of Sophie's hair behind her ear as she whispered, I'll miss you every second you're gone. I'll miss you too. Whoa, you guys are hardcore with your goodbyes, Keith said, shattering the moment. My mom just told me, see you, son. And my dad only asked if I checked how tight the pin on my cloak was so I wouldn't lose my family heirloom. Grady frowned and Edeline reached for Keith's hand, giving it a quick squeeze. A bit of pink flushed across his cheeks, then he cleared his throat and offered Sophie his arm. So, you ready? Probably as much as I'll ever be. Grady opened the gate and Sylvanie trotted out, stretching her wings as she knelt to let them clam on her back. Sophie's palms turned clammy as she wrapped her arms around Sylvanie's neck, and when Keith wrapped his arms around her waist, a big part of her was tempted to jump off and forget the whole plan. But she remembered what the vision of Jolie had told her. We have to trust. This was for Prentice. For Alden. For her. Better hold on tight, she warned Keith as she gave Sylvanie the order to fly. Sylvanie stood, flapping her shimmering wings as she galloped forward and took off, slicing through the chilly night air as they went up and then up some more. Sophie's eyes burned as she glanced down to see Grady and Edeline waving, but she blinked back the tears. She would see them again, and things would be right this time. Really right. Fixed. She held out the compass, waiting for the needle to spin. Time to follow the pretty bird across the sky.